So, dear participants, I think we may start. Good evening to everyone. My name is Valentina Zasadko, and I am a director of School of Public Management at Ukrainian Catholic University. We are launching a series of online events to tell the truth about Russia's war in Ukraine. This is full-scale war launched by Russia against Ukraine, not a conflict in Ukraine. Proper wording is critical. Today, we will be talking about the refugees. The International Organization of Migration estimates that the number of Ukrainians who have left the country since the start of the full-scale war has reached 3 million. I have the honor to introduce you the keynote speaker of our meeting, Dr. Franck Düvell, Senior Researcher at Institute for Migration Research and International Studies at Osnabruck University, Germany. Hello.
Hello.
And the moderator of today's meeting is Dr. Oksana Pyatkovska. Dr. Oksana Pyatkovska is Deputy Director of the International Institute of Education, Culture and Diaspora Relations of Lviv Polytechnic National University, Ukraine. Hello.
Hello.
Dear Dr. Oksana Pyatkovska, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valia, and thank you for this opportunity to join and moderate today's discussion about migration from Ukraine, about Ukrainian refugees and forced migration in Global East. This is actually a rather urgent topic to discuss, especially after, as you have already said, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which happened on the 24th of February. To start with, I would like to say that besides prominent keynote speaker, Dr. Franck Düvell, which you have already mentioned, we are happy to welcome our guest speakers as well. This is Katerina Prishchepa, a project officer at the College of Europe, Natolin campus, and she is actually volunteering in Poland and helps Ukrainian refugees there. Hi, Katerina.
Yes, hello. I don't have a very good internet connection, so I will be out of video for the most time, but I'll try to turn camera on when I'm talking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Olena Yapchanka and Natalia Staroduk, both are students of Ukrainian Catholic University, and right now they are actually Ukrainian refugees in European countries, and they will tell us more about their experience and how it happened. So hello, Olena, and hello, Natalia.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So since we have 1 hour and a half for this panel, I'm honored to pass the floor to our keynote speaker, Franck Düvell, to present his speech titled Forced Migration in the Global East, a Neglected Field of Research. So the floor is yours, Dr. Düvell.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for joining us today. Just a few words about me. I have been researching Ukraine and migration matters for about 15 years. I've been up and down the country. I've been to Sumy and Kharkiv and Kiev, Odessa, Vinica, and yes, Uzhhorod, Mukachevo, Ternopil, and some very small places, can't recall the names. I conducted, I think, about 6 projects related to migration, refugees in Ukraine, immigrants in Ukraine, migration of Ukrainians to the EU. I looked at the border control regime. I studied the border guards, detention center. So I have a very wide range of topics I've covered. Also, my wife's from Ukraine, so my parents-in-law are from Ukraine, from Lviv. I also have family there. I have many friends and colleagues. Our witness of marriage is from Kharkiv and endured 10 days or more of bombardment. Colleagues in Kiev and Odessa. So I'm also personally affected, I'm emotionally affected. And so this is kind of my background. And I was actually in Ukraine, in Lviv, at Uku, when the war broke out. On Wednesday evening, the day before the war broke out and before Russia invaded, I gave a lecture at Uku. It was, I thought, a very good one. I didn't know it would be the last lecture at Uku for quite a while, because next morning we woke up from the sirens and we were also told that all teaching and seminars were cancelled for the time being. Because I'm an expert in migration studies and in refugee studies, I knew that if we don't want to get stuck at the border and queue there for days with a small baby, we've got to be fast. So we grabbed our bag and parents-in-law took us to the border towards Przemysl. I know the border crossing in Przemysl. I've been there before for research reasons. I talked to the Polish border guards. I had been to the reception/detention center on the Polish side. It took us about 20 hours to get to Warsaw, where I had actually my next meetings. And the purpose of my visit and these meetings was actually to discuss collaboration project on the topic of forced migration IDPs in the global East. And this is kind of the backdrop to what I'm saying now. About a year ago, I conducted a scoping study to better understand the forced migration, refugee and IDP situation in what I call the global East. So the rationale is to overcome the Western epistemological bias, which consists of a very simple binary. There is the global South and there is the global North. And you exactly see there is no global East. The global East doesn't exist. And in my field, forced migration, everything's concentrated on Africa, on the Middle East, on Asia. So we study Afghan refugees and Syrian refugees and Uganda and Kenya and Mali and you name it. But there is no research on Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, on IDPs from Georgia, Moldova, and very little on Ukraine. So this part of the world, east of the Polish border, has been ignored, neglected, under-researched. I got very annoyed, started a project a year ago, and was in Lviv in February to arrange collaboration, set up a project, prepare a workshop and a conference. And what became clear, and I had actually written about that already 5-6 years ago, that looking at the trajectory of forced displacement and refugee, Russia is a major driver of forced migration. You only need to recall Afghanistan in the 70s, Chechnya, Georgia, Moldova, Donbass. Even before the current war, Russia was a main driver. Then add to this list Syria. War, violence, bombing of cities, the destruction of society became extremely vicious after Russia joined the war in Syria in summer, September, October 2015. And that caused a huge wave of displacement from the cities that the Russian Air Force attacked, destroyed, basically turned them to rubble. Aleppo, Homs, Hamas are the cities that come to mind, and several million people fled their homes and the country to Turkey. So we need to first highlight and acknowledge that Russia is a key driver of forced migration in the region. Russia has an extremely bloody, violent trail of warfaring. The type of wars Russia wages are wars against the cities and the people and society. They do not simply fight the armed forces or the armies. They fight the people, the economy. They destroy their houses. And this is the kind of war that Russia wages. I'm not yet certain, because I'm not a military expert. I'm not an expert in war. I'm not an expert in Russia. I'm an expert in migration. I think we still need to understand what is behind this destruction and the rationale. On the one hand, it reminds me a bit of the warfaring strategy of the Nazis. Destroy the occupied country's culture, the intelligentsia, the economy, take over the land, take over the resources, exploit the resources, and turn the people into slaves, cheap labor. That was the Nazi strategy. What Russia is doing in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and other republics is a bit similar in terms of the migration policy. Russia exploits these countries as sources of cheap labor, very similar like South Africa did during the apartheid regime with the so-called homelands that were underdeveloped poor countries from which Russia drew cheap labor. Whether this is behind their strategy in Ukraine, I don't know, to be honest, but I want to raise that point, and maybe someone's picking up the question. What we now have, and you probably all know better than I do, because you endure the situation, whereas I'm sort of warm, comfortable, and safe in my armchair in Osnabruck, Germany, is a full-fledged invasion, a full-fledged war, a very brutal, a very destructive war, aiming not simply and only at the Ukrainian armed forces, but the critical infrastructure, the economy, the factories, the schools, the hospitals, airports, ports, bridges, and of course, residential area, the buildings where people live, museums, theaters. We have seen all of it. So this is not simply aiming at beating the Ukrainian army. This is about destroying Ukrainian society, heritage, culture, families, you name it. Typical Russia, they did it in Chechnya, they did it in Syria, they do it again. From what I can see so far, up to 26 million people, more than half the population, are affected, either directly because their cities and homes are bombarded, shot at, destroyed, or indirectly because they live in the oblasts that are targeted by the Russian army. I can't really comment because I don't see all the news and I'm not such an expert on sort of the trend of the fighting, who's got the upper hand. We see a lot of sort of skeptical voices with regards to Russia's capacity. Invasion might be stalled, they are getting desperate, and this is why they become even more violent. Whether or not they manage, what their first aim seems to be to cut the country in two halves, a bigger eastern half, including the south, the Black Sea coast, Odessa, all the way to the border with Romania, which would Russia bring into direct contact with a NATO country. Whether they manage, I don't want to speculate. Whether they are able to hold the country against resistance and guerrilla and underground fighting, I don't know, but I think most people doubt that. What the plan is for Western Ukraine, I don't know either, whether they would allow some independent demilitarized West, or whether if they manage to occupy the East, also attack the West of the country. I don't know either. I hope nothing of that's going to happen. I hope I'm wrong with most of what I've said, but these are the kind of scenarios. I hope it doesn't sound too cynical to you, because you are directly affected. And also, what I think we need to notice is that Russia targets the more densely populated industrial, commercial heartlands in the east. Kiev, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Mariupol. It's these. It's the economic power of the country that Russia is targeting and destroying. So I think we have to have an eye on that. I understand, and we don't think about that too much, that much of Ukraine's economy came to a standstill. Business stopped trading. The ports are basically no longer in use, not Mariupol nor Odessa, which affects trade, wheat trade, which is a major issue, not only for Ukraine, but also for the rest of the world, which relies on wheat. So from the previous invasion, and I agree that the war didn't start in February. The war started in 2014. 2014 was the pretext, and it was the first step. Russia very strategically prepared the annexation of Crimea, built a bridge, put its military there, enforced its navy to embargo the coast. They prepared for the war already in March, April last year, when they had their first so-called major exercise. People were already worried about the war, and that was to set up the infrastructure, to have the camps and all that ready. So one could actually see what's going to happen a year ago. So it's a very long war, which began with Crimea and the Donbass, Donetsk and Lugansk. We saw that initially over 2 million people were displaced in eastern Ukraine. Some returned, some went to Russia. 1.5 million IDPs. And very typical in these cases, the Donbass is half depopulated. Half the people in the occupied parts have left, fled, emigrated, It's the same with Abkhazia, it's the same with Ossetia, it's the same with Transnistria. The people don't want to leave under Russian boots. We see depopulation. Who is staying? Ultranationals, the real Nazis in this case, army, militarists, criminals, and the elderly. The elderly who then maybe receive more generous pensions from Russia. Many of the young people seem to leave, so they are the IDPs. We knew from 2014 half the population will be displaced. Then about 1/4 went to Russia, the others were displaced internally. Our initial idea was, with this stage of war, if we take 25 million people who are affected, the Min, because of mobilization, are not allowed to leave cities or country, can't migrate. We actually have a migration potential of at least 10 million people. And this is such a big number, it's abstract, it's beyond belief, it's hard to imagine what that means. We see already certain patterns. Women with children leave, the men stay, some of the elderly stay. We see the huge trauma of separated families, the worries women have about their husbands, but also sons left behind. We also see older people leaving with the grandchildren. So the parents stay behind together, defending the country, fighting. The grandparents with the grandchildren leave. We see in the West more and more people arriving who experienced war. So they are already traumatized. We have so far 3 million Ukrainian displaced persons, and I deliberately don't call them refugees, in the EU. Almost 2 million in Poland, 500,000–600,000 in Hungary. I can't recall numbers of the other countries. The neighboring EU countries treat the war as a regional European war, which implies that there is a regional European responsibility. And this is why they keep the borders open and welcome people. There are, of course, other reasons. There is a common history. There is a common history historically that Ukraine was part of Lithuania, part of Poland, part of Hungary. Borders moved all the time. All these countries suffered from Soviet ruling. Some of the languages are different. We have Hungarian, Slovak, Romanian, and other minorities in Ukraine. So for various reasons, there are strong bonds between Ukraine and the EU, the European Union, Europe. Another strong bond is actually related also to migration. We have 30 years of migration of Ukrainians to the West. Labor migration, student migration, transnational families and marriages. At the moment, before the war, there were 2 million Ukrainians in the European Union. Largest number in Poland, Germany 250,000, but in almost every EU country we have Ukrainians. So what we got through migration was European integration from below. And Ukrainians in Europe represent a migration network. they might be able to host Ukrainian displaced persons. Not so much in Poland. In Poland, we have the largest number of Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians are labor migrants, often low paid, precarious work. They haven't got the apartments, the housing, the capacity to host large numbers of Ukrainians. In Germany, it's quite a bit different. In Germany, we also have the so-called ethnic Germans from Russia, who were deported by Stalin to the east, to Kazakhstan. They and their children and grandchildren moved to Germany, 2.5 million, so-called Russian Germans, they are called. It's a divided community. The older generation is very much exposed to the Kremlin's propaganda. They are rather more pro-Russia and pro-Putin. The younger generation is very different, rather the opposite. And very noticeable, the so-called free churches, small independent churches, because of the Christian ethics, are very hospitable and demonstrate solidarity and host Ukrainians. And they are found in every town, city, and even village. So it's a huge network. 2.5 million people, let's say half of them are pro-Ukrainian and have a humanitarian outlook. We also have the large Polish migrant community, over 1 million, and we also see signs of solidarity of the Polish community towards Ukrainians. The levels are not the same in other European countries, but because of migration, there are Ukrainians in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, France, Netherlands, the UK, just everywhere. And this network will sooner or later attract Ukrainian displaced persons who might well be dispersed from the first country of arrival, Poland, Hungary, Romania, to other countries. It's hard to predict, but there is a certain sort of chance and opportunity here. In the EU, the key questions are, how many people will come to the EU? For how long is the war going to go? For how long are people going to stay? And there are no answers. Everybody's hoping that Russia gives up, withdraws, will be beaten, and that then people by and large can return to Ukraine, to their home city, and maybe even to their homes. There is a very high level of destruction. How long it takes to rebuild Ukraine, I don't know, but Western financial support will be gigantic, will be massive. And maybe I should stop here because I had something like 20-25 minutes. I don't have a script, I don't have any notes, I basically talk freely. But please ask me if you have any questions, comments. Please tell me if I'm wrong or misinterpreting something. Matters are very dynamic. I get hundreds of pieces of information every day, and putting all that together is quite a challenge. And if you don't see me for a second, this is because I have to connect my charger. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your speech, Dr. Franck Düvell, and I presume that all of us will agree with your conclusion that Russia is the key driver of forced migration in the East. But of course, I invite our participants to write questions if you have any, and comments in the Zoom chat. So as we have already mentioned before, Russia invasion forced flee of people seeking safety and protection and assistance. And I've today just checked the webpage of UN Refugee Agency and found that the latest data as for 16th of March show that there are 3.2 million Ukrainian refugees already, and more than 1.9 million are in Poland. So actually the biggest number is in Poland, and as we all know, Poland already declared that they cannot accept any more Ukrainians. Some of those people stay in Poland while others try to move further to the west. And today we have Katarina Przyczepa as our speaker. She is a volunteer in Poland, the country actually which with the biggest number of Ukrainian migrants to seek international protection. So Katarina, how can you describe the situation from inside this country? How does Poland deal with this, well, actually extreme and unexpected flow of people, especially as we know children? And of course, well, tell us a few words about what you personally do as a volunteer.
I just want to, I was volunteering part-time, but just professional work, working with some international media here, so my experience is a mixed one. But with all of that, I have spent the most of them in Przemysl, the Ukrainian border. It's one of the border crossing points between and I've been for this purposes interviewing Ukrainians who are fleeing Ukraine now and looking for safety in Europe. And also I've been able to, well, to see with my own eyes how the authorities in Przemysl are trying to deal with the situation and what is the activities of the international organizations here, at least in Przemysl, and also to compare it what is going on in Przemysl and in Warsaw, which I also could have seen. So basically you have mentioned, Oksana, the official statistics. It is still believed that of this 1.9 million people, probably majority will remain in Poland, but significant part of those people, they are traveling for the west to other European countries. And also it could be that many of the Ukrainians who initially thought that they would stay in Poland, they might travel further just because there is no capacity at the moment to accept many people, mostly host many people in Poland. Also, from observation on the ground, I think Polish authorities, they were not, I guess it's hard to request of any authorities to be ready for such an influx of people, but they were not really ready for this number of people coming. What I mean that Poland has experienced a huge wave of Ukrainian labor migration in the last years, and this labor migration wave coincided with the war in Donbass, and probably the war has contributed to this wave. But in practice for the Polish authorities, it didn't mean too much of additional work. So what I mean that for the last 8 years, the official bodies which were working with migrants, they had additional workload. They had all the residence permit procedures were longer because the number of public employees working in those authorities has not raised much, but the number of applicants raised significantly. But to a large extent, every Ukrainian coming to Poland was able to basically to take care of themselves. They were coming, there were some issues, for instance, in some cases where the employers did not pay the due payments on time. There were some cases where employees, Ukrainian employees, were treated badly, but on a large, there was this impression on the part of Polish authorities that Ukrainians can deal with themselves and they can arrange their issues basically themselves, that they were coming with the already ready job offer. They had somebody in Poland who could help them with residence permit. They knew where to find the the accommodation. Sometimes they were hosted by industrial enterprises who hired them, and so on. And now you have an influx of people, most of whom, or significant part of whom, are not ready to join the labor market, even if the labor market is open for them, because they are quite often mothers with little children, or elderly people, or people in some way with some disabilities, and so on. And then you have an influx of people. You have more people coming in 3 weeks than came in the last few years altogether. So you have a sudden influx of people. You have people who don't speak foreign languages, that quite often, or some of them speak English but don't speak Polish for sure. And some of them already have very traumatic experiences, like people who flee in Kharkiv or some other cities under very heavy shelling. And so at the moment in Poland, the problem is that although there is a visible will on the part of the Polish citizens and on the part of the Polish authorities to accommodate Ukrainians, there is not enough coordination among different authorities. So there are decisions which could have been taken on the national level. They have been taken, but it's, for instance, the decision to allow the free transport pass for every Ukrainian. So every Ukrainian can use all the public transportation basically in Poland for free for now. But there is no coordination work, for instance, to identify all the possible places where Ukrainians can be hosted, and to basically allow for people to leave from the bigger cities and find accommodation in smaller cities. So most Ukrainians in Poland, they head for the bigger cities, probably because they heard of them something, because also the urbanization levels in Ukraine are higher actually than in Poland. So more Ukrainians are living in the bigger cities than Poles. And people probably, they don't have any idea how the life in the smaller locations in Poland looks like. So they are afraid that they won't be able to find the work there. They are afraid that they won't be able to find accommodation, and so on. And for that reason, you have some bigger cities in Poland which already are under heavy pressure. For instance, today I saw information that Warsaw's population has increased by 17% in a few weeks. So you have 300,000 Ukrainians in Warsaw, and it's very, very difficult for Warsaw authorities to find accommodations for all of them. That's why you have all those makeshift accommodations in the sport halls and so on. And of course, this is not the way for people to live for a longer time. This is something which is a very temporarily 1 day or two, and then people have to find some proper accommodation, even if it's not a separate apartment for one family, even if it's shared apartment, it cannot be a sport hall for a longer period of time. And at present, the problem is that that there is no this coordination among local governance in Poland, and there is no collected centralized information of where the accommodations are available, how to get there, despite the fact that many smaller towns in Poland declare that they are willing to accept Ukrainian refugees and they are willing to accommodate people. There is no this coordination of information, which makes people being stuck in bigger cities and also put additional pressure on social infrastructure in those cities. Another part that, as we know, many of the people fleeing to Poland are mothers with children. So we have a lot of children who are supposed to be going to schools. And this process is now, it started, so people basically can register their children to go to Poland, to school in Poland, wherever they are. There are no specific requirements. People just go and register. At least it has been declared by the authorities. People just can go and register in the nearest school. So far, the latest information, the latest statistic is that 54,000 Ukrainian children have been registered to go to schools in Poland, and this is a statistic for the last 10 days. So probably it's going to be growing fast. So we assume that of all those almost 2 million people, and even if we assume that some part of those people, even 500,000, went somewhere else in Europe, at least 1/3 of those are children of the school age, and they are going to be registered with the schools in Poland. And this is an additional pressure on school system in Poland, because you just need additional classrooms, additional basically schedule for children. I saw information that in some schools the Ukrainian children will be going in the second half of the day, so the normal classes will take part in the morning, and then there will be additional schedule for newly arrived kids. But I guess it also depends in terms of organization of schooling. The local authorities have flexibility, so it will be decided on the local level separately, I would say, independently in different places. And also, having compared just one point, that having seen what's going on in Przemysl and in the Medyka crossing point and in the bigger cities, I've been in Warsaw, in Torun in the last few weeks for one day for some official business, so to say. And it is actually striking how much disproportionately our resources being spread. So you have a lot of organizations working in Przemysl and the border crossing point, and I'm not saying that those resources are not needed there, but for instance, free food, which is offered for people crossing the border, is much more available in Przemysl than in some other bigger cities. And just to describe you how it looks like, for instance, you have a family or person who crosses the border from Ukraine into Poland at some point in the midday on a given day. So people would arrive at the border, and then by 11 a.m. or midday, they would cross the border into Poland. In Przemysl, they will cross the border in Medyka, then they will spend some few hours in Przemysl, and if they know where they want to go further, they will take a train and go further to some bigger cities in Poland. And if from there they're traveling further, for instance, if they travel from Przemysl to Warsaw, it is very common that they would arrive to Warsaw late at night, and their next train would be at 5 a.m. in the morning. And they have, after having spent a day or more on traveling from Ukraine, then a day of traveling in Poland, they will spend 5 to 6 hours in the train station in Warsaw, for instance, just to take train in 5 o'clock in the morning. So to go, for instance, to Szczecin, which is the opposite side of Poland from Przemysl, where they come from, or another city, or to go to Germany. And those people, they will be offered some free food in abundance in Przemysl, and then if they go travel further to the west and to the north of Poland, and the train station, there are less and less resources available for them. There are less places to sleep or to wait for the next train for 5 to 6 hours, and basically less volunteers who know what they are doing. So in Przemysl, it's very busy. And also not everything is provided as it needed, but it's more concentrated in the border crossing points, I would say, because I've been not only in Medyka, but in some other crossing points between Ukraine and Poland. And I guess this is also to the international humanitarian organizations who work now in Poland to decide where to be present. But I think it's disproportionate that there are much more on the border and much less. And I think that it might be needed also in the bigger train stations through which Ukrainians are passing now on their way to different cities in Poland or to the other European countries. I would say I would stop here, and maybe I could add something later. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Katerina, for this insight. And actually, I would like to ask you this. There is a question to Franck Düvell, and I would like to ask you as well. Do you think that those Ukrainians who come to Poland, they would like to stay in Poland because it is closer to the border, because they would perhaps they still have an opinion or desire to go back, so they don't want to move further to the west and stay near the border? Do you think this?
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few people, as you may imagine, and some of them say that, well, we have our family, that we are not from Lviv, but now our men are in Lviv, and we want to stay as close to them as possible, so we want to stay close to the Polish-Ukrainian border on the Polish side. Some say that we have somebody who is whom we know in Poland, or maybe at least the language is not that difficult to learn, that we would like to stay in Poland. Some say for that very reason that we will go to Czech Republic, because it's also like something you can grasp and you can hope to learn the language relatively fast. And for Ukraine, this labor migration, which has been present in Poland for the last 8 years, it is in a way a safety network for Ukrainians who arrive now, even if they don't know those people personally. But if people come from a smaller, very tight communities, not even in Western Ukraine, but from Donbass, I met quite a few people from Donbass who are saying that we are coming to stay with somebody, friend of a friend, somewhere else in Poland, because they have come to Poland relatively recently to work here. And it's so basically people from the same region, they would try to go and find somebody else from their region or town and live closer to them, and they hope that those people will be able to help them to find a job relatively fast and so on. So Poland, this is a place about which Ukrainians on average know at least something about, just because they know somebody who have been to Poland recently, who is now in Poland working, and so on. So this is something which sounds as like somebody I can grasp. That's why I would like to stay in Poland. People who go further west, there are other people who have family there, also family, friends, or who have immediate connection and who hope that they will be assisted in some way in dealing with authorities in those countries. And also I have met some people who go to places like Sweden just because they have been offered humanitarian assistance. Yes, so people for whom it has been arranged that they would be going to Sweden by some humanitarian organization. So basically people are choosing the place to go because they hope that they will be not facing authorities there on their own, not that they are afraid of authorities, but they still feel that they need some assistance on the ground. And that's why Poland is the place of choice for many, just because it's close to the border, and also they hope that they will be able to ask for help more often than in other places.
Thank you. So Franck Düvell, actually going back to that question, based on your experience of migration research, what percentage of refugees return home, and what should the country do to bring back citizens after the war? This is the question from Valentina Zasyatko.
It's actually too early to say, because there are different scenarios. The best scenario is Russia is beaten, gives up, withdraws, and the war is over in a couple of weeks or even months. In that case, I would guess, and this is what I understand from the people who have left the country, they would almost all probably want to go back home. People have been planning for 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months, not much longer, because they understand very well the dynamics and the uncertainties. And I don't think people now left Ukraine with the perspective of staying abroad for 1 year or 2 or 3 years or forever. It's just to run for shelter, to run for protection, and to get children or parents into safety. And if the war is over and if Russia withdraws, people will return. If the war continues, drags on, longer fighting, more destruction, economy destroyed, critical infrastructure destroyed, electricity, heating, factories, shops, working places, all destroyed, and the country is coming under Russian boots, under Russian ruling, then of course people think again whether they would want to return to a country that's half destroyed and occupied and ruled by Russia. I can't really sort of suggest how many of, let's say, the 3 million now in the EU would return. It also depends, of course, on the family situation. All these 3 million people are basically separated families. There are 3 million husbands and sons left behind. Families want to reunite, either in Ukraine or somewhere in the EU. So it's really impossible to speculate. The only example I can think of, or I can think of 2 examples. In the case of Yugoslavia, the fighting was short, fierce, and most people from Bosnia, Croatia, Slovakia and no, Slovenia, sorry, and even Albania returned within a couple of years, maybe 3 years. We also know from migration studies in general, but it's different for refugees, there is a point of no return after maybe 5-6 years. When the children go to school, when they learn the language, when they are integrated, when you find a nice apartment, when you find a job, then your attachment to the new place becomes stronger the longer you stay, and your wish to return to a country that's maybe half destroyed, occupied by Russia, is your wish to return to such a place is diminishing. The other case we know about is Syria. I did a representative study survey, 1,800 Syrians in Turkey. So the situation between Turkey and Syria, it's a bit similar to the situation between Ukraine and Poland. Neighboring countries, brotherly countries, historically, culturally, it's similar. Syria is still under Assad ruling. Only 20% of the Syrians want to return, but only under the condition that Assad is removed from power. Over 50% prefer staying in Turkey, the neighboring country, same religion, similar culture, food, and they also stay mostly in the border region near Syria, where there already was in Turkey an Arab-speaking minority. Only 20%, a bit more than 20% say they want to leave Turkey and go to another country, mostly to the EU, but people don't do that because they can't afford, they haven't got the money, it's too expensive, and it's also not legal. So that's very different from the Polish case, which is Schengen and people are free to leave and can go to any other country. So I can't give you a clear answer, but I can give you kind of different scenarios. And I'm actually asked by an international organization to develop exactly such scenarios. And there is a best case scenario, there is a worst case scenario, there is something in between. So if you ask me in 3 weeks' time, then I know better. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Of course, we will ask our next participants who are actually refugees, and they will share their opinion. But I can see that Lena Anderson twice raised her hand. We have only half an hour for left, so please, if you want to add something or ask, be sure to do it in a minute, okay?
Yes, thank you very much. I was out and in because of connection problems. So I'm Lena Andersson. I'm actually here as a representative of the Swedish Institute and the Malmö University in Sweden. We have since many years back had an Easter Partnership Young Professional Program at Malmö University. So we have more than 60 students somewhere around Ukraine. Some of them are temporarily outside because of job, they have, seek job outside Ukraine, but the vast majority is in Ukraine. And we have constructed an outreach program to all of these students to offer them some refuge in Sweden. I completely agree what was said earlier, that they would not come to Sweden unless they have a point of contact, and that's what we are telling them. Because honestly, we are impressed and we are also devastated with the burden on countries like Moldova and Poland, and we are trying to release that burden through personal contacts. I don't know how to do it, because it's a sort of, we can actually offer so much more, I think, than Poland right now, because we are a quite wealthy country and we don't receive right now so many refugees. But also we see that most of our students or alumni don't want to leave Ukraine or want to be very, very close to Ukraine. So we have a problem to motivate them. And these people are privileged. These are privileged people. They have salaries. They can actually work still in Sweden. But we also see another group, which is the people that our student works with. So we have a list of like 50 people that are disabled or are, you know, relatives or caretaker of disabled people. That is people that our students are working with, that we are now trying to get into Sweden, where we can actually take care of them. So my point is here that, you know, I'm not sure how to, our dilemma is whether to try and persuade people to come to Sweden, or whether to just leave them to be in Poland with the stress of the Polish government. And this is really a dilemma. And also to see how we can maybe, if there is somebody here, and this is like a call out, if there's somebody here who is in Poland that could help us to actually coordinate with us transport of all these disabled people and the caretakers to Sweden, because we have a really good collaboration with disabled organization that is experienced in taking refugees that are disabled. But we also need to have maybe a point of contact in Poland to make sure that they can come to Sweden. So this is like, you know, we are all here improvising, but I thought that this would be a really good forum just to put myself out there. And my email is lenasweden@gmail.com. And if anybody, I think the disabled people will arrive in Chelm on the 20th of March, and we are really grateful if we have somebody to coordinate with, and we would be happy to take them into Sweden. We have good people that are experienced and working with asylum seekers that are disabled, but we need to have a connection in Poland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lena. And I can see that Katarina would like to add this discussion. Something.
Yeah, so just also not also the ultimate comment, but just from a personal anecdotal evidence. Yesterday I learned about the situation of a woman who is elderly woman who is a single caretaker of her disabled son, and they crossed the border from Ukraine to Poland. Basically what I told, and I wasn't at that border crossing point, and somebody called me and asked me what could they do. My immediate suggestion was to go and contact Red Cross there, because at every border crossing point, there is now close to the border crossing point in Poland, there is a so-called reception center where everybody who crosses the border, not by train, but by land border crossing point, they are basically brought there immediately. And there you have registration of all those people, and also you have Red Cross point. And I think so it has to be somebody who is official enough for people to trust. So I think Red Cross is official enough to be trusted to. Other than that, it could be a Polish official organization. So basically, and this for the disabled people. So I said that the woman who has her son in the wheelchair and who basically has to be transported further with a special transport, even he couldn't take the normal train or bus. And I immediately suggested go to the Red Cross because they would be able to contact somebody. And I hope it worked. I had to check it out. And for the redirection of people fleeing Ukraine towards other countries, I think it should be done. I think some people decide to stay in Poland just because they don't know what else could they do. So if they get some official information that if you go to a country like Sweden, your perspectives are that and how it should be processed. So I think at some point, some of the people who are staying now in Poland, they will be willing to look for places somewhere else just because they won't be able to find accommodation here, or even, so I don't know for schooling how it's going to work because it's too early to say. But so Poland, for many, they have been, so I've been talking to many families who by the point they reached Poland, they were on the road for 3 to 4 days. And people who crossed the border into safety after 3 to 4 days on the road, some of them are not very willing to continue their road for another how many hours, I don't know, 24 hours along there, if they think that they could find some place to sleep here. If they, so basically maybe the solution would be give them a few days just to get a, you know, to get rest and to get a sleep and hot food, and then offer them something else. So also the policy, for instance, in Przemysl for the last few weeks has been that people arrive there and they are basically push, it's very rude word, but they basically encourage very actively to leave Przemysl as soon as possible to any other destination possible, to any other big city in Poland, to any other country. So there are, for instance, buses coming from different countries and people just being offered quite energetically, take these buses and go away. And this is done to basically keep some space in Przemysl so new people could arrive. What I'm saying that those people there, they are in this time of this situation of distress, and they, some of them who don't know anyone in Poland, they have to take decision very quickly, and they are reluctant to take this decision because they don't know what they are going. So if there is a possibility to give them at least 1 day or 2 days to sleep in a quiet place and then to take decision, and then being presented with information of their options from somebody official, at least, well, you know, wearing uniform, having some ID or credentials, and explaining what could they expect, I think it could work. But now the problem is that many people who don't know specifically, if they don't have any family, they are pushed or pressed to take decision somewhere closer to the border crossing point or at the very, very crowded reception center close to the Polish border, and it's not that they are in stress and they are not capable of taking such decision. So it has to be a situation of relative calm, and then it has, the offer should come from somebody, well, more or less official, and they need to have some, to see some papers and have at least half an hour or hour to, you know, to think it over and so on. So if there is a way to organize it in such a way, it would work, I think.
Katerina, don't you think that it would be even better to share this information just in the crossing borders? Because when people just cross the borders and if they get this information, they wouldn't stop in Poland, they would go further just after crossing the border.
just for you, just, I don't know if you've seen the pictures from the border crossing points.
Yes,
now.
I know.
So it's not the place, so like if you have a border, like land border crossing point in Medyka, for instance, and it looks like that in others. People cross the border on foot, and immediately after they came out of this border control area, what they see, there are stalls of different humanitarian organizations who give them hot food, which is needed, and it's okay. Then you have like crowds of journalists, you have hundreds, maybe not, but dozens of journalists who are filming them and taking pictures. You have photographers who work for press or for charity organizations. You have some, Polish firefighters who try to organize the crowd there. You have some Polish soldiers who also are sent there to organize the crowd and keep the order more or less. You have some heaps of clothing which people have brought there, and people could. Basically, it looks like not even as a bazaar, but it looks like a very, very chaotic place. And people sometimes are even struggling because the Medyka border crossing point is 15 kilometers from Przemysl. To get there, from there to the city, you need to take a bus, which is provided by Polish authorities. But some of them, they're even struggling to find the bus because buses are coming, they are filled in, and they're taking people to Przemysl. And then sometimes you have to wait for 20 minutes or so until the next bus coming, and people are crossing the border with some luggage and small children and some elderly. And you have all this crowd, and it's definitely not the place to absorb any information there. And then they go to the reception centers, and reception centers in Przemysl, they are huge. For instance, one of the biggest, most famous now in Przemysl is supermarket converted to host the refugees, and it's known as Tesco now. So there was a Tesco also, and so there are few thousand people there at the same moment. They are coming there, they're registered, and there is somebody usually with a loudspeaker shouting that there's going to be a bus to Germany in half an hour. Who wants to go to Germany, please go on here. And there are people with like table plates saying that I will take you to, I don't know, France if you want to, and so on. And there are some coins of organized activity like Red Cross medical points, a medical assistant point, but but there's a lot of people. It's very, very loud in there. So if you spend 1 or 2 hours inside of the center, when I came out of there, I was tired of just being there for 1 hour. It's not a place to take decisions, basically.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But we are actually running out of time, and I would like to pass the floor to our guests, our people who are refugees right now, Olena Yapchanka and Natalia Storudub. Just could you please briefly present yourself? Where are you from? Where you live now? I mean, the city, the country. For how long have you been already live there? And whether you have kids? Just briefly. Let's start with Natalia, because I already see her.
Well, I'm Natalia Storudub. Originally, I'm from Belarus. My family moved to Ukraine due to their events of 2020. And now we are in Germany, Rhineland-Pfalz, Earth. We have been a little bit less than 1 week here because firstly we came to Poland. I'm 42 years old, and my husband and I have 6 children from 3 to 18 years old.
Thank you very much. And Olena, could you tell us a few words about yourself, and we'll go further.
Yeah, hi, I'm Olena. I'm 34, and all of the 3 weeks I'm here in Poland. It wasn't my husband because we have a son 3 years old, and now tomorrow I moved to Germany because my best friend lived there, and I had this decision to move. What I'd like to say, yeah, there is no time because I had a speech, and I think as I can see, we have no time for this. But what should I say? That I'm really grateful for Polish people for all of that they do for us. It's even because I had known this story about 30 hours on the board, because at 9 o'clock in the morning I started my journey, and already at 10 o'clock in the evening I already was in Hungary. Yeah, it was a big luck. And then yeah, I moved to Poland, and I have a car here, and even the insurance for my car is for free, and the roads are for free, and everything that they can give us for free is everything for free. And but it's not only about the money, it's about this deep understanding of our situation, of the Polish people, and it's really important. And I hope that I will see the same in Germany. But my biggest hope is that I will back home really soon, because it's on the only my desire is
to go back home. I see.
Yeah.
Actually, you told us a few more things that I was going to ask you, but anyway, we'll go further, okay? So I'll put you some questions which actually consist of several sub-questions to get a better understanding of the so-called preparation process of your migration, okay? So could you tell us a few words about how you decided to migrate? Of course, it's obvious that everyone was afraid of you, of your love for your life and for the life of your kids. But what I mean is, what was the determining factor that you decided to move to the country? What was the crucial factor, the crucial factor that you decided, okay, I should move? So what was that? And so this is the first question. The other is, how rapid was your decision? Did you prepare for this migration or not? And the third is, why have you chosen this country you're right now? This is just, or was it a choice at all? And how did you get? Because Olena has just started to tell us that she spent 30 hours crossing the border. How did you get to that country? Okay, so Natalia, please.
Well, maybe it will be some funny story after the victory. My husband and I had discussed this scenario if war would start, and we were sure that we will stay in Lviv, where we could be, where we think that, yeah, we could be safe and how to say, as useful as possible. However, when war started, my 3-year-old son, I would say that was a reaction. That was not decision. That was my reaction, because we gathered things to go to shelter, and my 3-year-old son was really tried to be really brave and calm, but he came to me and leaned on me and calmly said, "Will you protect me?" And after that, I don't know, something switched in my head. I asked to my husband, "What do we have?" He said, "We have fuel for 70 kilometers, we have car, but we don't have insurance, and we have Schengen visas because we're Belarusians." I said, "Okay, let's come. Let's go. Let's go." Well, and we, of course, we chose Poland because that was the closest point. And during the trip, we remind that 3 of our children are were in Belarus at that moment. So 3 we had with us and 3. So Poland was a point where we must, in any price, to reunite the family. Thanks to our friend, we managed to do that operation. However, lots of people in Poland, Belarusian diaspora in Poland helped us, and local people in Poland. We got to the village. So thanks to Magda, thanks to Beloglazovi family. Yeah, however, bullying against Belarusian people, because for Polish people, we started something like presenting aggressor side. So we decided to move further, and we decided to move to Germany. And here in Germany, again, I had some network thanks to our former life and friends in Trier, and they helped us with volunteers, helped us with everything.
Okay, thank you very much. And Olena, what about your crucial push factor, and how and the reason you got out and decided to move to Poland? And actually, why are you trying to move from Poland to Germany?
Yes, actually, my reason is here now. It wasn't planned. He decided by himself to be on a video now. Actually, it was the second day of war, and it was this first alarm in Lviv. Okay, the second, but the first, like when we went to shelter, and we have not the best apartment for the war, let's say, and for bombing, because it is not a 10th floor, and with the big windows, and the military part just beside, yes. And that's why it's not the best place to stay, but for me it wasn't the big problem. I could move to parents or someone and to stay in Lviv, but my husband was very he was very worried about our son. Yes, and then he stayed in Lviv. And I'm already 6, and I haven't seen my parents and all my families, all my friends. And it is the hardest, I think, for now, for me. Why Poland? Because okay, because it's close, because the language is very similar. My husband works in a Poland company, and he has a lot of friends here, and that's why they helped us for this first couple of weeks. We stay in their house. And why I had this decision about the Germany, because my best friend lives there in Stuttgart, and for me now it's extremely important to have someone close, someone very very close to me, and that's why I decided to move to her house at least for maybe 1 week. Another hot point is that we don't know how long should we stay here or in other country, or what should we do next. It is the hardest, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just wanted to discuss a little bit about the possibility of integration to the country you're staying at. So you speak the language. Do you speak the language of the country you are? You have just told us about the relatives and friends you already have, and I would like to know whether you know or whether you receive any help from Ukrainian diaspora organizations. Have you met them? Do you have any information about them, and do you really feel their support in your country?
Well, no, me neither. My husband or children don't know German, and Polish too. We speak English more or less. However, here authorities, we are now in Mandorn. It's a village in Germany, but I can assert they do their best. They are so fascinating as a comment. Well, everything you studied us in UQ, how to make a team. I think our Burgomaster made his perfect team. You know, they are marvelous, I would say. Trying to speak with us using Google Translator, but they understand all our needs, etc. About Ukrainian diaspora, I think people here get support from Ukrainian diaspora, maybe because I have plenty of support from Belarusian diaspora. I can't assess Ukrainian one. Olena, maybe tell us.
So, Olena, could you?
Yes, about the language, I think I understand Polish very good, but I speak, let's say, a basic. My language is basic, but it's more than enough here in Poland for now for me. About the Germany, no, I don't speak German, but just in December, and I know that there is no problem if you speak English to manage everything that you need daily, all your daily needs. And as I don't have plans to stay in one of this country, that's why it is not a problem for me. And about the diaspora, Ukrainians, or someone, I just didn't have this need to connect with them because we have friends.
I think there's a bad connection with Olena, so we can go further. You started to speak about German as a country which converts and actually changes its migration policy towards Ukrainian refugees, Ukrainian migrants. Could you add something else? Perhaps you would like to add something else. What steps have already been done, and what innovations do you expect? I mean, what changes have already been done in the countries to help Ukrainian refugees, and what do you think should be done? If so.
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert of politics still, and thanks goodness haven't had any experience to estimate previous EU policy about refugees. But I think it's a real something like gold track, I think, because for us a new law allows to look for the job, to move free around the EU. So now it seems really nice. Let's look how it will work to estimate it, to assess it.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, in Poland, already so many things are done that, to be honest, I cannot even imagine what they can do more for now. Maybe just many of people have the same thoughts as I have. What's next? Okay, now we have this protection of the people who need homes, who needs food and so on, they have it, but what's next? And maybe the government, not only in Poland, but in all EU government should have this plan what to do next with these millions of people, and it's not the end.
I see. I can see that Franck Düvell and Katarina would like to add something. Yes. So please, Franck Düvell, would you be the first, please?
Yes, thanks. I mean, again, the answer is very difficult because it's only just after week 3 of the invasion, and unfortunately, Germany was unprepared. That was not necessary. Germany, the EU, the West could have been prepared much better. They could have been done much better to prevent the war, to stop Russia. You know, they haven't done it. They could have been prepared better for the war and for the displacement, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to know, and they didn't want to see this coming. So country authorities are taken by surprise. The biggest step was to trigger the EU's temporary protection directive, which has never been used before. The main advantage is that people do not need to apply for asylum, which is an individual process with all the checking and all the documents and all the interviews and all the evidence. The whole public apparatus would be completely congested because it's too many people. People would be waiting forever until they get a decision, very long period of uncertainty, and all that is not necessary now. So this is the best decision and actually good news. The next question is, how will it be interpreted and implemented? Because that's not yet clear. Accommodation will be provided. Education, primary education, healthcare will be provided in Germany. Some benefits, but fairly limited, below the level of the usual social benefits will be provided, but it's still better than nothing. Self-employment is allowed, but it's not yet certain whether employment will be allowed and under which conditions. So this is negotiated. I'm not yet too worried because this is not the prime concern. At the moment, people don't want to stay for longer. At the moment, we have women with children, and women have enough to do with childcare. Employment is not the prime concern. The older people are beyond employment age anyway. So I wouldn't want to make too much of this. If the best scenario happens and the war and occupation is over sooner or later, then we do not need to think about a longer-term perspective. The temporary protection directive up to 3 years will do the job. If displacement is for longer, we have a new situation and we need a new discussion about a longer-term residence permit. What we do not want to have and what we can't have is a Turkey situation where Syrians are under temporary protection for 10 years. Temporary is not 10 years. Temporary is temporary. That's maybe 1 to 3 years, but then either people return or they are given a proper longer-term permanent status. We are not yet there, so no need to raise an issue, to make a fuss or to criticize. For the time being, I think matters are okay. Authorities and society do their best. The best is often not good enough because there are limited resources, there is limited know-how, there is maybe not enough housing because we have a housing crisis in Germany. There are issues with kindergarten in schools, and there will be problems, but the problems will be addressed. And there will also be always people, unfortunately, who fall between the cracks, and we have to look into that. But I'm fairly optimistic that after a sort of chaotic period of orientation, and this is what we have now, in particular in Berlin, because Berlin is a bottleneck. Everybody wants to go to Berlin, and that's maybe something that needs to reconsider. And this is because all the trains go to Berlin from Krakow, from Warsaw. They go to Berlin, the buses go to Berlin. That's not ideal. Why not Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Cologne? There is support and help everywhere. In terms of distance to the border and to Ukraine, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Berlin is now one of the most expensive cities in terms of living expenses, housing, accommodation. It's already very crowded because it's so popular. I'd say consider going somewhere else. The distance doesn't matter too much. People across Germany speak English. You have Russian speakers everywhere. It's surprising, but you have them in all towns and cities and villages. And if they don't have Russian speakers, then they have Polish speakers. So there is a language community and there is a welcoming network. There are issues, problems, but that will be addressed. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just a few minutes are left till the end of our meeting today, and I can see Lena has raised her hand, and Katya would like to add something. Just 1 or 2 minutes, okay? Could you turn on your mute?
Lena, you're muted.
Sorry. So complicated with the Zoom things. So I just want to say, I mean, we have in Sweden, it's not far from, it seems far, but it's not far. There are direct flights on low fare airlines between Malmö and Warsaw. Malmö is where I'm based. And this is where we get the people in, actually, because that's the cheapest and the simplest way to do it. But there are also ferries to Sweden. And I put my email in the chat. Please contact me if you have anybody. We have a lot of housing. This is a country with very few population on a very big area. We can help. Please encourage people to move just a bit of kilometers north. And I think Sweden is ready to help. We have already, free commuting, free childcare. We have accommodated all of the kids of the parents in schools in Sweden already. So, we have capacity. We're a rich country. We have capacity. Okay. If you want to help people come to Sweden, just email me and I will help to accommodate them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we have run out of time, and thank you very much for this amazing discussion. I really enjoyed this, and I'm pleased to invite Valentina Zasadko for final remarks.
Thank you for this important conversation. Oksana, thank you for moderating. Franck, thank you for your willingness to share your expertise and your time. Thank you all of you for contribution to today's event, and we will continue to plan and to organize another meetings, and we will keep you informed about our upcoming events. Stay safe. Glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Bye.
Bye.